The Secret Family by Michael Poole. Once upon a time lived a man that seemed to be alone his entire life. His name was D'Antonio Jackson. He was seen as an outcast to his family and a black sheep. Sadly, this man passed away at the age of 29. Today is the day of his funeral. Many of his blood relatives, ranging from parents, siblings, distant cousins, etc., all gathered for this ceremony. He felt hatred his whole life, but now everyone had tears in their eyes and told stories of how amazing he was. It was too late for him to hear these things, but someone else did. The funeral was all family members, but sitting in the back was a woman dressed in all black with two small children. Whispers began to flow through the funeral because his family was full of gossipers. The focus went from sending him off to everyone trying to figure out who these strangers were. The host of the funeral then announced there would be a special speech about D'Antonio. Suddenly, the woman in all black walks to the front with the two children walking behind her, and she grabs the microphone to speak. She introduces herself as D'Antonio's wife and says that the two little children are his. This sent murmurs and a wave of shock through the building. Confusion was thick in the air. D'Antonio's mother began to look closer and saw the little boy looked exactly like D'Antonio did at that age, and the little girl had many of his features as well. This statement led to many outbursts, and some even called the lady a liar. Throughout this, D'Antonio's wife is stone-faced and showing no emotion. She then says, "He warned me about you people." The lights dim. The host of the funeral then begins playing a slideshow of D'Antonio and happy moments with his wife and kids. The room goes completely silent as photographs begin to display. D'Antonio rarely talked or even smiled around his family. In every memory shown with his wife and kids, his smile was as wide as the ocean. The lights slowly began to brighten. The one question now on everyone's mind was why wouldn't he tell anyone he had a family? The funeral was concluded shortly after due to time constraints. As the pallbearers carried D'Antonio's casket to the hearse, his mother asked his wife and two kids to join her on the ride to the cemetery. D'Antonio's mother had many questions, and his wife Ariel had many answers. Miss Jackson was confused once they entered the hearse, but she seemed to understand more upon exiting. Ariel and the children attended the burial, but they did not partake in the repast. During the repast, there wasn't a celebration. It seems as if all the grief that was shown earlier was gone. In fact, there were whispers of resentment and negativity floating through the room. Majority of the conversations were based upon the strange lady that showed up to the funeral. His grandmother is more upset about the food is not finished yet rather than upset about her grandson's death. His brother Tommy mentions that even in death, they can't escape D'Antonio's weirdness. D'Antonio's sister Tiffany even states that she thought he was gay because he never brought women around them. The harshness and participation in these conversations grew. His mother was completely silent from still grieving and observing the conversations being had about her deceased son. That's when she finally couldn't take it anymore. She stabbed her fork into the wooden table and everyone stared in fear. She stands up and announces that there will be a mandatory meeting at her home the next day for D'Antonio. She angrily walked away as the room was filled with silence. Once the door closed behind her, Tiffany made a joke that she had never been to a week-long funeral service. Many began laughing and the defamation of D'Antonio's name continued. The next day, the mandatory meeting was scheduled for noon. At around 11 in the morning, Tiffany texted her mother and asked, was it really that important? Tiffany said she planned to get drinks with her friends so she might not make it. A few moments later, their mother received a phone call from Tommy saying he doesn't know why they're having a meeting about D'Antonio when D'Antonio doesn't exist anymore. The mother then tells both of them to show up or never speak with her again. Tiffany texts back okay with a rolling eye emoji. Tommy responded with, "Just because D'Antonio can't speak with you anymore, we can't either, huh?" The mother then just set her phone down and prayed to God for mercy. There is a ring at the doorbell. Their mother opened the door to see D'Antonio's wife and kids with a tall man in a suit. This man was introduced to the mother as the family lawyer chosen by D'Antonio before his passing. Upon entering, Ariel asked about the other guests arriving. When the mother dropped her head out of embarrassment trying to explain the difficulties, Ariel hugged her, a hug that was well needed. Insanely, no one had hugged Miss Jackson since D'Antonio's passing, not even his siblings or grandmother. This hug went on for about 2 minutes. There were no words exchanged, but the silence spoke volumes. The first of guests to arrive was D'Antonio's grandmother. Miss Jackson opened the door to warmly welcome her mother, but was rudely pushed to the side. D'Antonio's grandmother, Big Mama, then told Miss Jackson that she was in a rush and the bingo hall was calling her name. Her rudeness was interrupted when she saw the lawyer, D'Antonio's wife and kids sitting on the sofa. Big Mama then forces herself to smile and greet the guests before heading into the kitchen. She was followed by Miss Jackson into the kitchen. Once there, Big Mama fires up a cigarette even though Miss Jackson usually made guests smoke outside. Miss Jackson just looks at her mother with disappointment before Big Mama asks, "What is the problem?" Miss Jackson then tells Big Mama how rude she was to her great-grandkids. Big Mama responds and says that she only had 5 grandchildren, 2 from Tiffany and 3 from Tommy. She says those kids in the living room are none of her grandchildren. Miss Jackson just shakes her head and walks back to the living room. When she returned to the room, Ariel didn't confirm it, but Miss Jackson could tell she overheard the conversation. It was now 15 minutes past noon. Big Mama was now saying she was about to head out since no one showed up, but there was another ring of the doorbell. It was Tiffany. She had on sunglasses on a cloudy day and had a styrofoam cup in her hand. She overconfidently walked past her mother saying, "Let's get this show on the road. The star has arrived." She smelled like 1,000 gallons of alcohol. She then lowers her shades to get a better view of the people on the sofa. Her mother then tries to formally introduce Tiffany to her sister-in-law and her niece and nephew. Tiffany then lets out a before pulling her shades up and tooting her nose high in a snooty fashion. Interestingly, Ariel didn't react. She just shook her head yes as a way of acknowledging the disrespect. Tiffany then heads for the love seat couch and begins texting on her phone. 10 minutes later, the meeting had yet to officially begin and patience was wearing thin. Big Mama was getting crankier and Tiffany was getting agitated from the booze. Suddenly, loud music could be heard coming up the street. Miss Jackson opened the front door to see Tommy driving up the road in his big pickup truck, windows fully down but the radio on full blast. He had his wife and children with him. He was being trailed by 2 other vehicles that contained like 10 family members. He hops out the truck full of excitement. He then lowers the trunk bed and it is full of items for a cookout. Miss Jackson was confused and asked Tommy why he brought this many people to a private meeting and why he brought product items. He then tells his mother that he won in life and why not celebrate another victory. His choice of words seemed to startle Miss Jackson momentarily. All the other family members began pouring into the home in the mood for a party. The atmosphere in which they entered was like mixing oil and water. It didn't mix. There was an awkward silence for moments until Miss Jackson instructed the other family members to head to the backyard. She then tells Tommy and his wife to sit down. During the midst of this, D'Antonio's daughter goes up to Tommy's kids and introduces herself as Trinity. Tommy's children all began to smile and introduce themselves. This gave D'Antonio's son the courage to join them and ask if they were his cousins. It was a surreal moment for the kids, and all the adults watched with different emotions on their faces. Miss Jackson then instructs the kids to go to the playroom and get to know each other. They began running and talking over each other, excitedly catching up on each other's lives. This brief moment of joy was cut short by the uncaused animosity and tension in the room. Tommy then holds up his shiny new custom diamond watch and says to Miss Jackson, "Can we hurry this up? Time is money." He keeps his wrist held up for a few more seconds and twists his arm so it reflects in the light. His wife then begins to smile and air clap for Tommy while kissing him on the cheek. This annoyed Ariel as she let out a soft sigh. She was not impressed. Now that everyone was seated, Miss Jackson took the floor. Big Mama let out, "It's about damn time." Miss Jackson brushed off this comment and informed everyone that this meeting was to discuss D'Antonio's will. "Will? I'm the one with the money," Tommy yelled out. "Why, did he leave us 39 cents? Tommy's wife found this joke hilarious and obnoxiously laughed. The lawyer is getting irritated with the lack of respect. The lawyer then stands up and politely asks Miss Jackson if he could facilitate the meeting from there. Tommy's joking nature became very hostile when this happened. The lawyer then opens up a briefcase and pulls out a folder with a single sheet of paper. As he does this, he explains to the room that he was just not D'Antonio's lawyer, but he and D'Antonio were like brothers for over 10 years. He was also the godfather to D'Antonio's children. Blood wouldn't make them any closer. He said this while looking through Tommy's eyes into his soul. Tommy began snapping his fingers in a disrespectful manner to rush the lawyer. The lawyer just smiled and began to read the will. The lawyer announces that the letter is handwritten and signed by D'Antonio. He said he is going to read the letter word for word and asks that they hold all questions to the end. And I quote, "To whom this will may concern, in case of my death, this letter is, and the contents spoken about are to be handled by my brother from another mother, Lawyer James Houston. I know during my time spent on earth I barely connected with any of you, but I would only like to apologize to my mother. I never got the time to thank you for giving me the moments of life I did receive. I hope you enjoy your grandkids and know that I'm still here, living through them. Enough of the sentimentals though. It's time to get down to business. With little knowledge to my blood relatives, I have built an empire with my beautiful wife, Ariel. An empire full of many assets that has now need of new ownership. To Ariel and my children, I leave 80% of my assets. That includes our home, every business that I own, every car, stocks, and every rental property. Ariel has full rights and access to 3 of my 5 bank accounts. To my mother, I leave full access to one of my bank accounts. This accounts total $5 million. To my grandmother, I leave you with a prayer, because all the church attending you does means nothing. Your spirit was tainted long before I was born, and I know I won't see you on the other side. To my siblings, I want to say thank you. Thank you for the little blessings that are my nieces and nephews. My nieces and nephews have trust funds for $1 million each. These funds cannot be accessed until they turn 18 and will be distributed in increments. Therefore, none of these funds will be handled by their parents. So, if you try to be spiteful towards them, they will be just fine without your financial support. Individually, however, I have some things to leave to my siblings. To Tiffany, I leave you sympathy. You are so oblivious to how much you hate yourself that you project it onto others. I refuse to inflate your ego any more than what it already is by giving you anything that I've built. To Tommy, my dear brother, fuck you. I was my brother's keeper, yet our entire lives you treated me as an enemy. You competed with me while I thought we were teammates. Every chance you could, you tried to belittle me and show off. I am a self-made millionaire and I never flexed on my family once. I always protected you even though you are older. I knew just how insecure you were and faking it till you make it was your coping mechanism. I let you feel like you had power thinking you were the richest person in the family. I had been wealthy for quite a while and yet still showed love to you. I never mentioned anything about my life because I didn't want it to matter. I treat all people as human regardless of materials and their financial status. With that being said, I thank all of you for showing me your true colors and how you really felt about me. My final 10% of assets will be donated to my charity foundation. Goodbye. The room was frozen with silence for about 10 seconds until Tommy broke it. He began laughing and saying, "Get out of here." He asked where the cameras were because this had to be a joke. He was the only one laughing and everyone else was frozen in shock. The lawyer then hands the letter to Miss Jackson to confirm its authenticity. Miss Jackson looked at the paper and began to cry softly. Miss Jackson knew this letter was completely legit because of D'Antonio's horrible handwriting. She had many memories of her getting on him about this in elementary school. Tiffany then pridefully storms out of the house without saying a word. She made sure to give the door a big slam on her way out. Not even 30 seconds later, Big Mama gets up complaining about how they wasted her time. She said if he wasn't leaving her anything, she could go win herself at bingo. She slammed the door on her way out just as Tiffany did. Out of nowhere, two relatives pop out from the kitchen. They were supposed to be in the backyard setting up the party, but they were listening in the private meeting. One of them asked, did he say anything about leaving something to cousins? This was supposed to be a joke, but the truth in it overshadowed it. Ariel and Miss Jackson then scolded these two relatives until they tiptoed back to the backyard. Boom, boom, boom. There wasn't a slam of the door this time, but there was a pounding. Miss Jackson opens the door to see multiple police officers and a woman in a suit. They then ask, was Tommy at the residence? Miss Jackson opens the door further and Tommy is looking spooked. The officers enter and immediately handcuff Tommy. Tommy, his wife, and mother are all frantic. The lady in the suit then calmly introduces herself as a special agent assigned from the government. She reads Tommy his Miranda rights and then tells him why he was being arrested. She states that Tommy is wanted for theft, embezzlement, and fraud. She also states that his bank account is frozen and every penny stolen will be returned. She also informs him anything that he purchased with the stolen funds now belongs to the government. The usual standoffish, cocky Tommy was now looking shameful with no rebuttals. Tommy's wife then screams at him that she thought he was a millionaire. The government agent snickers and says, not even close. He's not even worth 6 figures, barely 5 figures. Tommy then pleads to his wife that he needs her help right now. He asks if she could call her father to get him a lawyer. His wife then looks at him and takes off her fancy diamond ring and then tells him that she's filing for divorce. She told him to figure out what he was going to do with the kids because she had no use for them now. They were her insurance to her lifestyle, but since Tommy was broke, the kids were now useless. She was about to walk out smoothly, but the agent told her to give her the ring. It was now part of the evidence. His wife rolled her eyes and complied. She then spat at Tommy's direction and stormed out. Tommy's head was down, then he looked up with tears in his eyes. He looks at the lawyer and asks if he could do something and maybe represent him. The lawyer then sarcastically grabs the air and says he would, but his hands are full. At this point, all the commotion caused the relatives in the backyard to enter the house. Everyone is shook as Tommy is now sobbing. He is then dragged to the police car. The relatives that came with him were all thrown off and decided to leave when they realized there would be no party. They only came because of Tommy. Nobody ever visited or checked on Miss Jackson. The chaos has now ended and still there is Ariel, the lawyer, and Miss Jackson. The lawyer then makes a phone call and says that everything is good now. That's all he said before hanging up. There then is a ring of the doorbell. Miss Jackson then pleads to the Lord she can't take any more nonsense. She opens the door and covers her mouth in astonishment. It's D'Antonio. He has a huge grin on his face and says, "Hello, mother." Miss Jackson then gives him the biggest hug in history. While he is hugging his mother, he gives his wife and lawyer a head nod in gratitude. All the kids then run from the playroom and hug him. His nieces and nephews are in tears to see him again. Only his wife, kids, and lawyer knew he wasn't dead. Why and how were the only things on Miss Jackson's mind. D'Antonio then sits down with his mother on the couch to explain. He emphasized things he said in his will letter. He mentioned how he never felt a part of his blood family and recognized how they treated him. Instead of confrontation, he was so hurt by the treatment, he secluded as much as possible. He told her how much it started eating at him being so blessed, but he knew God would punish him if he shared with the wrong people. He needed a way to officially clean house and see who deserved to be in his life. Suddenly, there was a ring at the doorbell. 5 people entered the home. They all embraced the lawyer and Ariel. D'Antonio then introduces the people to his mother as his real family. D'Antonio had known some of these people for over a decade. He told his mother sometimes your family is not the one you are born into. D'Antonio then says he heard there was supposed to be a party. Let us celebrate new beginnings. The end.